speaker, our third speaker, is Professor Jo Phoenix, who's a sociologically minded criminologist who spent 25 years researching sex, gender injustice, and youth justice. She was one of the conveners of the Open University Gender Critical Research Network. When she wanted to talk about the challenges of self-ID in the context of female prisoners, she was unlawfully cancelled and then blacklisted from the University of Essex. She is one of the subjects of the Rheindorf report, and she's now taking a case of harassment, discrimination, bullying, and constructive dismissal against the Open University. And she wanted me to add that she has an obscene number of spectacles.
How's everyone doing? Yeah, good. Wow, those lights are bright. Forgive the QR code. If you have a phone and you point it at the QR code, it will take you directly to my crowd justice funder. I'm not asking you to contribute because I have a feeling that probably most of you have already contributed, if not once, twice, possibly even 3 times. But what I am asking is if you can send the message further to other people who may not even know about the case, because this isn't just about me. This is about trying to stop the sort of things that Judith and Alice have been outlining happening in our universities. So the court case is all about putting that line in the sand between harassment, discrimination, bullying, and all the other horrible things that happen, and academic freedom. So let me just arrange myself here. I've titled this talk Stonewalled. Long before the word Stonewall was synonymous with a, some might say, disgraced LGBTQI employment rights organization, it referred to a riot that took place in New York City when police raided a lesbian and gay bar. Those of us who are lesbian and gay and of a certain generation, boomers, know the story about the butch lesbian who threw the first brick. But before Stonewall had anything to do with people who were discriminated against, criminalized and shunned for their sexual orientation, or for their refusal to stick to gender stereotypes, it had another, far more ordinary meaning. It meant to delay or obstruct by being evasive or refusing to answer questions. It is to this original meaning that the title refers, although the multiple layers of meaning are not lost on me, and hopefully by the end of the talk, they won't be lost on many of you. Right, on with the talk. What I'm going to tell you is really the story of what happened in a few short chapters, and the main players in this story aren't really me, although, you know, the story is about what happened to me. The main players in this story are my colleagues at the OU. There's something that Alice referred to, a subject access request. A subject access request is where you request of an organization all the data they hold on you, and they must give it to you. Shortly after all the hell started at the OU, I made a subject access request, and I got something like 11 gigabytes worth of emails that were about me over a 5-6 year period, and I was quite surprised. I thought that people didn't like me. Well, I don't mean me or like. I mean, I thought they only had a problem with me around, I don't know, 2021. I discovered it went much further back. So the quotes that you're going to see as I go through, they come from the subject access requests. They are my colleagues, often my direct colleagues, writing to often my seniors. So once upon a time ago, I got contacted by a person I did not know. Her name was Kathleen Stock. Many of you may have heard of her. Hey. She asked me if I was paying attention to Stonewall's influence in universities. I said I was. This was about summer of 2018. I said I was paying attention because I was increasingly concerned about the move for self-identification in the context of female prisons. This was during the time that the Gender Recognition Act consultation was happening to move towards self-ID. And I could see where it would end up. And it ended up with Isla Bryson. So I agreed. Now, that same month, in October 2018, a departmental colleague sent an all-staff email copying in someone in a senior EDI role in the university, asking colleagues to band together in my department to write a trans-positive response to the GRA consultation on self-ID, and that individual appended 2 pages of some of the most vitriolic descriptions of people who might not support a policy of self-ID, claiming that since the consultation went live, there were a number of anti-trans groups specifically set up to oppose it. Fair Play for Women, Women's Place UK, that these groups have a powerful voice in the media, that the media is publishing factually incorrect information, like there might be a conflict between sex-based and trans rights, that these groups are all funded by far-right anti-abortion American fundamentalists, like Breitbart, that it was vital that academics band together on behalf of their institutions. Just need to pause there. On behalf of their institutions. So as employees of an institution. And write a submission supporting self-ID. So as I say, all of this stuff came from subject access requests. I later found out, i.e. about 9 months ago, when I got the subject access request, that following the publication of that first stock letter, one of my direct colleagues wrote to someone in a management role over me. We can see what was said. On one level, I can actually understand this individual's thinking. And when I say I can understand their thinking, I mean I can follow the logic. May not agree with it, but I can follow the logic. And the logic goes like this. The stock letter challenged the so-called diversity expertise of Stonewall, right? But for these academics who complained about us, they saw Stonewall as the forefront of knowledge and expertise. They never saw Stonewall as a lobbying organization whose expertise is that of a political lobbying group. Some might call that propaganda, I don't know. Now, in dismissing Stonewall's version of the truth, they thought this could potentially lead to that which Stonewall would claim it would lead to, a hostile working environment. So you can break the logic down and go, okay, yeah, totally disagree. The transphobia here, not agreeing with Stonewall's political lobbyist group's vision of transgender rights. I've been at pains to say this throughout the last 5 years, whenever, well, since 2018, is that 5 years now? 5 years. That particular vision of what transgender rights are is only one vision of many. Just one vision of many. Anyway, so really the complaint here amounts to little more than, but the letter says Stonewall's advice is wrong. Right, another example. That was the second letter. Raising this as a concern. That means making a complaint in the university. So one employee making a complaint about another employee. Now, we fast forward in time. So I gave a talk for an organization called WPUK. I'm sure many of you have heard of it. My department had organized a conference with the Center for Crime and Justice Studies that they then canceled at the last minute because the director of that center was accused of being transphobic. His organization had published a comment on prison policy saying that transgender women ought not to be placed in female prisons. This prompted me to give a talk for WPUK, and I saw that as an opportunity to set out my thinking on prisons, but mostly on why the line that TWAW, trans women are women, is problematic. One could say I set out my feminist gender-critical views in that talk, and that we needed to respect and understand and know about the experiences of transgender prisoners. We shouldn't conflate them with female prisoners and male prisoners. We need to study them separately, if you know what I mean. Now, this prompted at least one of my colleagues to write, again, to someone in a senior EDI role, complaining that me doing my work, i.e. doing public talks, thinking through issues, trying to unpack why this, that, or the other line of reasoning might have problems, so doing the thing I was paid to do by the organization I was working with, created a hostile environment, but also thought that a defense of academic freedom comes at the cost of equality. So this is going back to 2019. We're already beginning to see, being against Stonewall as being something that jeopardizes equality and diversity, and that saying that doing something like that is within the rights of academic freedom was wrong. As was mentioned by Joan in the introduction, we fast forward some more months in time. Me and a few other of the GC colleagues that I had, and when I say a few other, I mean 3 other gender-critical colleagues at the Open University. We'd been called Holocaust deniers in an open union meeting. I got told that I was like the racist uncle sitting at the Christmas dinner table. In the meantime, I think that was from my gender-critical views, not just, because, I'm not sure. We'll find out in court. That person is called as a witness. So I'd gone to Canada. I'd given a paper on the row about trans rights and sex-based rights in the UK. I'd taken part in a research project looking at the issue of self-identification from a prison officer's point of view in Canada. I'd written a paper about it. It got published. I'd come home. I was scheduled to deliver an invited seminar on trans rights at Essex University. And that got cancelled at the last minute because of the threats of protest and students claiming that I made them feel unsafe. I know this is a bit of shtick. Whoops, look at that. I'm 5'3", right? I can't even walk on a stage. I mean, really, I made them feel unsafe. And the poster that was at the bottom of your Turf's a Slur one, when you had all of those, that shut the fuck up, Turf, that was a poster on Essex University about me. This was the first time I'd heard the problem formulated like this, and this has haunted me ever since I got cancelled from Essex. The effect of that cancellation and blacklisting was enormous. It cast a long shadow over my professional career, even after the review came out, even after the Reindorf review, because in this world that we live in now, an accusation of transphobia is evidence of transphobia. And what a superb move on the part of the propagandists to be able to pull this one off. Those who oppose Stonewall oppose social progress. Those who oppose self-ID oppose social progress and threaten the dignity and respect of a group of people and are simply beyond the pale. And how do we know that that happens? Well, we accuse them of it. Perfect. So by the end of 2019, I'd been cancelled. There was an additional thread to the background lobbying against people like me in my organization. They were prepared to ask my employer to have an institutional position. That's quite different, isn't it, than just making personal complaints. They were asking my institution to have a position in order to demonstrate its duty of care in the face of the threat and harm my alleged views posed to a workplace culture. Now, I just want to break that down a tiny bit for you here. Some fellow paid employees were thinking my employer needed to take an open position against me when I was doing my job. Even when doing that ended up with me being unlawfully treated because they thought that the way I did my job meant my employer was failing to take care of other employees. Now, I'm stressing the employee aspect of this. Academic freedom is something that a university has an obligation. We have freedom of speech. Universities have an obligation as employers to make it possible for us to do our job, for us to ask questions. That's all. Just ask questions. But apart from the head twist of all of this, there's something else to note here. Academic freedom gets moved from this legal obligation of universities to become seen as a rationale, a trope, a justification, a defense, rather than what it is. Now, if there's time to tell a story, I don't know if there will be, I'll tell a story about German universities during the Third Reich and why academic freedom is so bloody important. But for now, let's just move on with the story. So we fast forward some more time. We have a global pandemic, sends everyone home, drives a horse in court. I knew I was going to mess up at some point. Drove a cart and horse through most of our research projects, through our teaching, and it leaves everyone in the country in this incredibly vertiginous state, not knowing up from down. On a personal level, I had found some other colleagues at the OU who saw the world like I did, only a handful. And we were fed up of being made to feel like pariahs. We tried to find others like us. And we used many of the tactics and strategies used by myself and others, lesbians particularly, back when we couldn't be out, before Stonewall. We had recommendations from other people, vouchsafing. We chatted about research, and we dreamed of a time when we could form a research network, knowing that even talking in these terms was enough to invite censure. And then came May of 2021. The Rheindorf report was published. That changed the world for me. But more than anything else, the Employment Appeals Tribunal ruled that gender-critical ideas are worthy of respect in a democratic society. And to me, the combination of the Rheindorf report and Forstadter's win meant that the world changed altogether. And I knew, as did my teeny band of 5 other academics, that they could not shut us down legally if we started the Open University Gender Critical Research Network, which we did. Now, much of what happened in the months afterwards is known, perhaps to some of you. There were petitions, there was Twitter mobbing, there was harassment of a level I have never experienced in my life. And of course, there were calls for the university, our employer, to dissociate or disaffiliate us. So our employer was going to disassociate themselves from the work that we did as part of our paid employment, right? Which is crazy. Or, to use a word that I now think most gender-critical feminists ought to use, bonkers. Right, so just a few more quotes here, just to give you a sense. These are all taken from subject access requests. These are all emails that have my name in it, and the name of some of the other colleagues that I have, and they were all sent generally to the executive and people in positions of power in the university. That's the one I liked best. University's Transphobic Research Network. Holding GC views is protected but not expressing them. Guess what? Forstatter helped us again with that one, didn't she, this year? Okay, OU-GCR created obvious potential harm. I just want to stop for a minute. I'm going to flick to the next slide, and I just want to stop and have a little think about this word, harm. Right, the logic runs like this. Anything that is GC is by definition transphobic because GC, gender critical, challenges a particular political vision of trans rights that says that gender identity matters more than sex in how companies and complex organizations order their everyday working lives. Because it's transphobic, any organization that allows gender-critical meetings or research is by definition creating a hostile working environment. Please see earlier comments about Stonewall, right? Stonewall did a blinder here. For trans and gender non-binary people, this means they will be harmed. If there's a hostile environment, they will be harmed. Because harm is to be avoided in organizations, gender-critical meetings and researchers ought to, because we have academic freedom, do it, but never on the company dime, right? Never on the company time. They need to do it in a way that's clearly not connected with an organization that employs them, even though that's what they're doing. Yet, here's the perversity. We are only given this platform, and I say we collectively, the 3 of us and many of the other academics working at this coal seam, are only given this platform to do this work because it is paid employment. As much as I am a signed-up member to the cause, I'm not a hobbyist. I'm not. If I got paid off tomorrow, which I don't think is ever going to happen, but if I did, I'd probably go and walk the dogs all the time and maybe just make the occasional blog and not actually do any of the work that I currently am not allowed to do. No, I'm lying. I am allowed to. Reading is a marvelous place to work. So, I'm going to end there. And I'm going to say thank you for listening. There's another QR code there. I want to say that when all else fails, that the oppressors, if you like here, the harassers, the other side, whatever you want to call it, reiterate the idea that researchers can do their research and that no one is infringing our supposed academic freedom, which is very poorly understood. They think, in these claims at any rate, academic freedom is seen as being freedom of speech. Silencing is being seen as literally just losing a voice. That it's not what we're talking about here. So we're enabled to do it as long as the organization that employs us to do this work takes every step to make sure that we do this work in our own time and not connected with the university. So in the face of all of this stonewalling, all I have to say, and I'm sure that Alice, Judith, I know Joan, and many other academic colleagues working away and resisting this madness, we are not hobbyists. We are paid to do this work. And hopefully, if I say we, win the employment tribunal, universities will have to make sure they take a stand. They don't give in to the bullies. They protect employees from this ridiculous treatment, and they hold the space open for academic freedom. Thank you. Which part of the story? Oh, the story about the Third Reich. Yeah, the German university's minister, shortly at the beginning of the Third Reich, was given the task of ministering all the German universities. One of the edicts that he issued within weeks of arriving was that the Nazi theory on race would be taught at all universities. And the extraordinary thing is that many of the academics in Germany simply capitulated. That was it. So the story there, the punchline of that is that the reason universities have to maintain academic freedom is without that, then government and politics can interfere and warp the knowledge base that we have.